Hey guys, Kyle here with Dark Iron Diesel. Today I'm going to do a video on replacing the head gasket on a 5.9 Cummins. This first video will be the removal, and I'll post a second video on the install once I have it back together. This will be a step-by-step video, so if you're pretty good with a wrench, you know, you're a decent mechanic, you could probably follow along and do it yourself and save yourself some money. So anyways, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions, ask in the comments or look me up on Instagram at Dark Iron Diesel and shoot me a message. Thanks guys, let's get at her. So this is actually my personal truck I'll be using in this video. If you follow me, you'll know that my last video I did kind of what to look for when buying a used diesel truck. And I went over my truck and found that it was pressuring up like crazy. So it is time to do the head gasket on this unit. I'm also upgrading some parts. I'm gonna do some Hamilton valve springs and heavy duty push rods because I plan on doing a bigger turbo once this is all done. And of course I'm using ARP head studs. One more quick thing before we get started is this is just how I do it. You can do this in different steps. I don't know everything. I don't claim to be a master of this. This is what I know and what I've done in the past, and it works for me. So I hope this helps you guys. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna disconnect the negative battery cables. And then I also remove this air intake elbow just to get it out of the way. And I'm going to drain the coolant. Okay, while that's draining, we can start taking apart some stuff on the engine. So we'll start with this plastic cover on top of your valve cover. Make sure you take this off, your oil fill cap off, before you pull this off. It's always a good idea too to change this crankcase ventilation filter if you haven't done it in a long time. So it helps with relieving crankcase pressure so you don't end up blowing your front or rear main seal or any other seal. So good idea to change that guy while you're at it. Now you can take these two lines off of your crankcase ventilation filter. Sometimes it helps to kind of get a little pry bar or something back there just to kind of pop them off. This one here, mine has a bracket back here. I'm just gonna take that bracket off so that I can pull them out of the way, kind of like pull that one out of the way, and then I can get this one out over to the side. All right, now I'm gonna unplug all the electrical on this side and this dipstick bracket. So there's two bolts for the dipstick bracket. It kind of go off to the side, and then you got three plugs for your injector harness. You got a sensor down there. Anything else you see, you can just kind of move it all off to the side so we have more room. I also recommend that if you're kind of new to this or you haven't done something like this before, it's a good idea to take a couple pictures just so you can see, look back at how everything was ran when you were putting it back together. Back behind your intake elbow, there's mounting nut and bolt here for this wire. Take that off and unplug your grid heater, and then we can fold all this electrical off to the side. Now that everything is off to the side, I'm gonna grab a blowgun and I'm just gonna kind of blow this all out so that once we start taking this stuff off, we're not getting debris falling into the engine. And notice back here, I have a bone. I have no idea where that came from. Also found a peanut shell. That's really weird. I had no idea where that came from, but I wonder what you'll find on your truck. Okay, now we're gonna take the valve cover off. There's just 6 10mm bolts. Okay, now we're gonna disconnect all these injector power lines. It's a good idea to take a picture again to make sure you know which colors go where. And then once you have all those off, we will unbolt this rocker housing and pull it off. Now we're gonna pull all these rocker arm assemblies off. Before we do that though, just break this jam nut off. I believe it's a 14mm, and then use an Allen key. I think it's a 5mm Allen key, and back these valve adjusting, the adjusters, I guess, back them off a full turn or a half turn at least, just because when we put the head back on with the new gasket, and if you get your head decked, which you should, you know, you just want to make sure it gives room so that you're not putting more pressure on the valve. So it's always good to just back these adjusting nuts off before you remove them for the install procedure. And when we put it back together, we're going to be doing a valve set anyways, so we will take care of all the extra lash at that point. Some of them are going to be tight, and if you notice, like on this one, it's pressing this valve down, or those valves down, so they're going to be a little tight. But the ones that aren't pressing down, you should just be able to twist them like that with your, once you have that lock nut backed off. Okay, I backed all these valve lash set screws off a little bit, and yeah, now we're going to take these, each rocker has a 10mm bolt, so take them each out, and we're going to try to pull them out together. Okay, it's a little easier with two hands, but you're going to try to pull this off. Just be careful that you don't drop these rocker bridges or push rods or nothing. And then what you're going to do is you're going to bring it over to your table, and I always just set them on the table exactly how they sit in the truck. All of these you need to keep matched to the cylinder and the components they're with. So, you know, cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Keep everything all lined up in order. Okay, all the rockers are out. Now you can pull off all these rocker bridges and pull out the push rods. Again, just lay them all out in the order they sit in the truck, so you put them back in the same hole and on the same valves when you're reassembling. To get these back push rods out, there's these, let's see if I can get one, these guys in here. There's two, they go one here and one for cylinder 5, one for cylinder 6. And you have to pop them out, and then that gives you room to pull the push rod up, and you actually stick it up into the firewall, and then you can angle it and pull it out. All right, and there is all my pieces, and that is exactly how they sit in the truck. Like I said, keep them all in order. Okay, we're gonna leave this for a second, and we're gonna quickly pop off this intake elbow and the grid heater. So it's pretty easy, 4 bolts, you got a hose clamp there, and then when you pull the grid heater off after, you're gonna wanna disconnect this little power line. And we'll get that out of our way because next we're gonna pull our fuel lines off. Okay, now we can go ahead and pull off all the injector lines, and you're gonna have to disconnect these little brackets, and again, keep them all in order. Okay, this last fuel line for cylinder 6, I'm gonna take off this lifting bracket just so I can get at it easier, but we'll have to put this lifting bracket back on when it's time to pull the head off. Okay, once you got that back fuel line off, you can take these fuel tube nuts off. So there's gonna be 6 of them, we'll just get those nuts right out of there. Keep these all in order, just like everything else. Keep them in the same cylinder they came out of. Okay, we got all our fuel tube nuts out. We're gonna leave the fuel tubes in just for a second here. Let's take these injector hold down bolts out first. Leave the injectors in, obviously you can't pull them out till the tubes are out, but we'll loosen off all the injectors. When you're backing off the nuts, just do 1 or 2 turns on this side, then go to that side, just kind of evenly back the nuts off. So go ahead and remove all your injector hold down bolts out. Okay, I got all my injector hold down bolts out. So now I usually use like an upholstery tool or something, kind of get it in here and pry out gently. Try not to damage the threads on these, and we're gonna pull out all 6 of these. These especially important, they have to be matched to the injector. So again, keep it in line. Okay, we got all the fuel tubes out in the order that they came out. Okay, all the fuel tubes are out. Now we can pull the injectors. So kind of what I do first is I try to grab it here. You can see, and I kind of wiggle the injector back and forth a bit. And then you can usually get under here with a pry bar. Be very gentle with it, but I'm gonna use 2 hands when I do it because I wanna hold this with my left hand, and you can kind of pry up very gently, not to wreck anything, and they should pop out pretty easy. And there's a fuel injector. Make sure you're putting it with the fuel tube that they were matched to. Okay, once you got all the injectors out, we're gonna pull off this fuel rail. So there's 3 bolts. What else is there? There's this fuel line. You're probably gonna wanna disconnect it down in there at your fuel filter housing too. And then there's a fuel line underneath it as well. You can just undo it there and the fuel rail should pop off. Okay, fuel rail is off. Make sure too, you're not losing these little washers, your little seals for your banjo bolts there. Now we're gonna go back here and we're gonna take off this bracket on the back of the engine, and I don't ever put it back on. So you'll see there's some electrical hook to it, just kind of pop that out and then remove this bracket. I believe there's 2 bolts, I forget what size, and then that bracket should come off. Okay, the bracket's off at the back. It was 13mm bolts. Now there's this fuel line here that goes to the back of the head. We're gonna disconnect that. It's a 19mm banjo bolt on this engine, I believe. And again, just keep those the seal washers, and we're just gonna pull that bolt out. The fuel line is gonna stay there. It's gonna stay in place, but we just need to disconnect it from the back of the head. Okay, now we're going to unbolt this fuel filter housing. There's just 2 bolts there. And then if you look behind, there's a wire, or some wires with a bracket there. We'll have to disconnect that. And then kind of just see if there's anything else that's attached on the head. There's also this bracket right here. We'll take that off as well. So just kind of go over the passenger or the driver's side and make sure everything is disconnected. Okay, I think that's everything on the driver's side. Now let's go here, disconnect your upper rad hose, well, up here where your thermostat housing, I guess, and we'll just grab this and fold the whole rad hose off to the side. Once the rad hose is out of the way, there's a few bolts up here for all this electrical. You can take those bolts out, and you can actually fold this top electrical, you can fold off to the passenger side. And the bottom one, you'll have to leave it in there, but just get it all disconnected from the front of the cylinder head. Okay, so we can't quite move this wire over to the side. It's still connected over here, but it's gonna be easier getting that little bracket off once we get the alternator out of the way. So go onto your tensioner at the bottom. I usually go from underneath the truck, loosen it off, and have somebody pull the belt off for you. Get the belt off, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take this top bolt out and loosen the bottom bolt, and then I'm just gonna pivot the alternator off to the side. So it's still gonna be mounted at the bottom, just loose, and then you don't have to pull the whole thing right out. Okay, I got my alternator loose off to the side. Now you can take this little nut off, get this electrical. This is your, I believe this is your grid heater electrical. We can fold it over to the side. Just pop it off there too. That's some other electrical to get that off. And once we have that off, we'll start pulling this exhaust manifold off. All right, so first thing, we will pull off this heat shield, just a few nuts. Okay, now we can go ahead and start removing the exhaust manifold bolts. First, you gotta take these, has these stupid kind of retainer clips. And for some reason, they're just on cylinder 5 and 6 here, so you just kind of gotta use a chisel or something and just pop them off first before you can get the bolts off. If you try to put a socket on like that, you'll just strip the end of the bolts. So you have a retainer clip here, one underneath, and yeah, they're a pain in the ass to get, but yeah, get those off. Then there's also this one stud, this bracket for this coolant line. So you'll take that nut off, and then you can pull this coolant line out to the side a bit and get that bolt there. And yeah, we're just gonna take off all of our exhaust manifold bolts and just leave the exhaust manifold sitting in the truck like that. We won't pull it right out or nothing like that. So you can get those all out now. So I'm having some problems with this coolant line bracket. I can't get it to come out enough to come off the stud because it just hits the back of my exhaust manifold here. So I've tried everything and I can't do it. I even have it unbolted up here. Like, the whole thing is loose. So I'm actually just gonna cut it here, and then when I have the head off and everything, I'm going to modify it a bit. I'm gonna weld it back together, and I'm gonna cut a slit in the hole so I can slide it on and off the stud and then just when I slide it on the stud, then I can tighten the nut on it. So I'm gonna just modify this a bit, but for now I'm just gonna cut it. So if you're gonna also cut yours, just be very careful. Don't cut into your coolant pipe, obviously. And if you found a different way to get this thing off, then let me know, because I would really be interested in finding a way that requires me not to having to cut this. So let me know. Okay, this intake and my turbo and everything is off to the side. Yeah, it was a pain in the ass. I cut that bracket back there and then the piece came off no problem. And then I used pry bar. I stuck the pry bar in back here and hammered it, or I used a chisel or something to pop that retainer clip off. So we're almost ready to pull the head. Let's take this coolant line off here, and then let's put that bracket, the lifting bracket, back in on the head there. Okay, now we can remove all of our head bolts here. Now what you want to do is you want to start from the outside. So do these two outside. You could probably even do these 4 and then do those 4. You just kind of want to slowly work your way from outside all the way so that the last bolts you loosen are the ones in the middle. And what that does is just it prevents any warpage of the head. All the head bolts are out. Let's see if we can wiggle it. Oh yeah, looks free. So just go over it one more time. There's a chance that we may have forgotten something, or there's a chance if you're doing it on a little bit different year. This is a 2003 truck, so if you're doing it on a little different year, it might be slightly different, but just go over it, make sure it doesn't look like anything else is connected, and then we'll run a chain across here and we'll pull it out. Okay, chain's on. Now let's grab the engine picker. If you put some screwdrivers in there, then the hook can't slip on the chain. But anyways, I think we're pretty much ready to go here. So it's always good, I get a guy on the hoist and have another guy watching, making sure that nothing is pulling or getting stretched. Because I mean, there's always a chance we forgot something. So it's good to just keep an eye and go very slow while you're doing this. Pull it back a little bit. That's good. So the head is off. This looks way too clean from what I'm used to. Like, I wonder if the previous owner before me had the head gasket replaced too, and they just didn't use head studs when they put the new one on. But I'll have to, once I clean this up on the install video, I'll make sure I put a flat bar here so I can make sure that this deck isn't warped, because that could also have been causing my pressuring issues as well. So right now is a good time to kind of go over this, have a look at all your pistons and your cylinders, look for any cracks, any imperfections, stuff like that, just so before you go spend money on getting your head resurfaced and all that stuff, you make sure you don't need, you know, a full rebuild or something like that. So just take a look, go over everything, and then yeah, you can cover this up with plastic or rags or whatever, and just wait until your cylinder head gets back from the machine shop. So here's the cylinder head. Now, like I said, I'm shipping this away. We're just going to drop it off at my local machine shop. They're going to basically take my head apart. They're going to inspect it all. They're going to deck the head, which means they're just going to plane, you know, 1 or 2 thou off the bottom so that it's got a fresh, you know, the bottom is nice and shiny and smooth. And they're gonna pressure test my head and check for cracks, all that stuff. So before I send it away, I gotta take out, you wanna completely take everything off other than the lifting hooks I usually leave on. So you're gonna wanna take off your manifold cover, or whatever you wanna call this thing. You know, I got a bolt there, coolant temp sensor there, I believe. This guy here. Just take everything else off the head so that the guys at the machine shop don't have to deal with it. Well, that's it. The intake is all open. Took my thermostat out. I'm gonna put a new thermostat in. I recommend you too. And yeah, it's gonna go to the machine shop now. Here are my new Hamilton valve springs that are going in, because I'm gonna be upgrading the turbo and injectors on this truck down the road. So I'm also upgrading the valve springs and push rods. You definitely do not have to. But if you do I do recommend you doing it if you plan on doing some engine upgrades more than just tuning. Okay, well, I think that about does it for this video. Like I said, this was just the removal. On the next video, I'll go over kind of cleaning the head, getting it ready, cleaning your deck, you know, getting the new gasket on, all that stuff. And yeah, the whole install procedure. So again, please like and subscribe. It takes me quite a bit of time. Like, you'd be surprised at the amount of time it takes me to edit these videos. And if you guys got questions, ask in the comments. Look me up on Instagram at Dark Iron Diesel. Shoot me a message. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching.